thing really work? How does it really do what it does? Because it works on a parent contradiction. There are two words that you must remember. Okay? You must remember, just like remember how you memorize the word Nam Super, and I'm sure you all know that, naturally. There are two words that are very, very important that also separate the men from the boys in Hashkafa. Okay? These are very rare words that I've never really seen used except in our house, for Moshe Chaim. They are very technical, but they are very profound words. The words that you have to learn are the following. Oh, it's a nice step, actually. Take Boilet Hora. Take Boilet Hora. Now, most of you know what the word Lam is. What is the word Lam mean? Evil. What does the word Tiberis mean? It comes from the word Gura, might, strength. Tiberis means the ascendancy or the gathering strength of evil. The elevation or the increasing power of evil. Can you get that? You get that theme there? That is the essence of the Yichud. Every time a person does a chait, this becomes opposite. Evil gains ascendancy in the world. That is the way it operates. Why it operates that way is later on. First, let's understand how it operates. The essence of its mechanism lies in the concept of the birth or law, the ascendancy or the increasing might of evil. What does that mean? That means that the more you do a chait, the more sins you do, the blacker the world becomes, the darker the world becomes. The world becomes closed in greater and greater levels of choshech. What is choshech? Darkness. Greater and greater levels of darkness. We are going to discuss what we mean by choshech. Darkness. Now, you may think, well, I know what darkness means. It's quite obvious. No. This choshech is so subtle that you have no idea that it's happening. That is the most incredible thing. The world gets darker and darker, and you don't even know it. That's the most astounding thing about Chaim Yichud. That's why nobody knows that it operates, and why very few know its existence. So you'll say to me, what am I talking about? You can't tell dark from light? Yes. As far as physical phenomena are concerned. Talking about physical phenomena, light and darkness, you can tell light and darkness. But as far as the darkness represented by evil, by law, and the light represented by hope, you cannot recognize the difference. The truth of the matter is it would probably take me 3 to 6 months for you to begin to subtly understand what I'm talking about. That's an incredible thing. That's unbelievable. That is how subtle this thing is. The day, and I make a statement, and I don't know if anyone will understand what I was about to say. Because what I was about to say is not an intellectual idea. It is an emotional experience. The day that you understand or grasp this darkness, you will forever cease to be the kind of person you are. That itself will automatically elevate you to a whole different realm of experience. The day that you understand what this means and what I'm talking about. There are people who sit their entire lives and learn and do not comprehend what that is. Except in a very, very primitive way. That's a very strange thing. The manifestation of it is extremely subtle. And what I'd like to do today is to go into the expression of the word law from a very fundamental standpoint. is a person. Atom is a person. Now, what is an atom made of? An atom is made of a group, right? Plus neshama, the soul and the body. Now, we've talked about this a number of times, and it's very, very critical to remember that these two entities are entirely separate. See, you think that because you're composed of both, that these two must be together. They must be connected together. They're found together. That's what you think. That's what it means to be a person. You see, like in order to have a human body, you have to have a brain and a heart. A brain does one thing, the heart does something else. But these are all necessary organs for the body, correct? So you think, what? To be a person, you gotta have the neshama and the guf. What is the guf? Well, the guf is the thing that you can walk around in. The guf is the vehicle. And the neshama is the thing which gives it life. Right? So you need to put together for a person to stand up and do something. No. Absolutely not. You can live completely without a neshama. A neshama does nothing for your life. Absolutely nothing. If I were to snip off your neshama right now, you would live and do exactly as you do now. There would be substantial changes, but not in anything that I could notice until you opened up your mouth. And you started talking. As soon as you open your mouth and you started talking, you can instantly see when suddenly this man is void of neshama, although there are already no such people as such. Well, it's questionable. See? You can tell. Because the neshama, the presence or absence of neshama, really is indicated by what you say, not by the fact that you have an ability to say. We've gone into this before. If the neshama lives by itself, rather the guf. The guf is something for the body. You, all of you, walk around and you are the same way you are with the guf alone. What gives you life if not the neshama? What gives you life is called the nefesh. Right? Rather also, the nefesh tachtona. The bottom or lower nefesh. That's what gives you life. And that's contained in the blood. That is the most subtle, ethereal form of matter. That's in the blood. It is this element which gives you life. Not that. If this were taken out, you're dead. The body suddenly ceases to move. When that's taken out, nothing happens. Except as dealt with the contents of consciousness. What does that mean? That means that the Bunchen did a very peculiar thing when he made man. He took two different entities and he put it together. Each one capable of surviving and existing on its own. The world of gufas or bodies lives on this world in the physical universe. Where do the shamas live? The shamas don't live in this world. The shamas live in a different world, the world of the shamas. It is a reality to them, whatever that looks like. You see, it doesn't have spatial and temporal aspects. It has other aspects to it. And there are many neshamas that communicate with each other just like we communicate with ourselves. But they are absolutely different types of beings. It is impossible for us to know what a neshama is, or imagine what it looks like. Just like you cannot understand what a malach looks like. It is beyond our ability to sense. Because why? What is the neshama composed of? It is composed of what substance? Ruchni, spirit. The guf is composed of gashmi, physical matter. Because it's composed of ruchni, ruchni is a type of substance which is beyond the ability of us to sense. We have no idea what such a thing is. This has a world by itself. You see, it has its own needs. It has its own reality. It can communicate with other neshamas. Does it have needs? Yes. Does it have satisfaction? Yes. It has all these things. It has its own set of drives, its own set of satisfaction. The guf has its own set of drives and its own satisfaction. Both are two different entities. The similarity would be, for example, between a man and an animal. They're two different entities. Each has its own life. Now what the Bunchen did was an extraordinary thing. He took these two entities and he merged them together. And he said, you two will never be able to separate. Never. To the end of all existence. You have no idea how unhappy who became, the neshama or the guf. Well, the truth of the matter is both become very unhappy. Because both now could no longer do. Let's go upstairs. We put together these two entities, two separate individual entities, each one wanted to go in its own direction. Now, because one is composed of gashmi, so physical substance, and one is composed of spiritual substance, they want to go in different directions. One has nothing to do with the other. It's an absolute insult for either one to be associated with the other, really. You see, it's like you were forced to live with an animal in your house. Really. I mean, the neshama looks at the guf like a total animal, which it is compared to the neshama. Someone brought in a cow and was forced to sleep in your bedroom with you. Right? That's exactly how the neshama feels. What? Right? Some people really don't mind. But that's how the neshama feels, you see. Now, how does the guf feel? Well, the guf obviously is honored. Okay. But this is the thing. And the Buddhism says that you two must merge, right? You two must be together forever. You will never be separated. Well, that was supposed to be that. Now, because of certain things that happen, specifically because of the hate, the sin of Adam, the guf and the neshama do become separated. And their separation essentially occurs as death. But that concept of separation was not supposed to have happened. That was a deviant thing, which we will get into, you see. But in actuality, the plan is that these two are never separated. Why are they put together? There are many reasons for it. Many reasons on a deeper level. The simplest level is very basic. In order to allow bechira or free choice. Because what happens is if the person is composed of these two different entities, the person then therefore will experience the drives of both. And by experiencing the drive of both, he then must choose between the two. It gives him the concept of choice. Well, the concept of choice is exactly what the Buddha wants. He wants to give the man the choice. Either to go in a spiritual direction or in a non-spiritual, physical direction, and that will determine what will happen to him in Olam Haba, to the end of time. You see. So, in order to give the person that choice, he had to construct the person of two separate entities, two different substances, each having its own different types of inclinations. Merge it together and let the person be able to experience the totality of both. Both impinge on the conscious mind. Both tell the person what to do. He feels both. He has got to choose. Now obviously the man is not the guf and he's not the neshama. What is the person really? Is he the body or is he the soul? The truth is he is really neither and he is both. That is the strange thing. That merger is a very unique merger. Because what it is that even though both of these are capable of separate consciousness, their merger somehow produces a total consciousness, which in some way incorporates both of them now as drives or as directions. But the man really now is really the merger of both, in a sense. He's really the merger of both. Yes.
Is he the chooser? The one who chooses?
Yes. He is the chooser.
So who he is the chooser?
He is the chooser. He is the superconscious level that incorporates both of these consciousnesses in himself. You see, and they become represented as drives. One going in the direction of spirit, the other one going in the direction of physical. You see. Now this is not a clear thing. You see, it's a very difficult problem. Exactly what is the actual relationship between him and these two? I have never seen a clear exposition of this. I've never seen anyone really even look at this problem. It's a very, very difficult one, really. But to my understanding, at this point, he is a merger of both of these, you see. So that both of these now become represented as drives, as actual drives, impinging on the overall consciousness, which now incorporates both. But remember, either of these could exist on its own and be its own being. Yes.
But then would that add up to an other?
Right.
So you're saying that you might also be saying that each one attaches itself to this theoretical third thing. So that if one were to disappear, the other one would then continue to be attached to itself.
Not really.
That's not the same as saying 2, 1 plus 1 is so that equation.
Well, the truth of the matter is, I don't think it wouldn't be appropriate to really go into the fine details of the thing. It's not clear. I've never seen a clear exposition on the fine details. And I think at this point we just have to really just accept this concept that both of these are capable of separate consciousness, and they definitely are. Why? Because like I said, the guf can live without a neshama, and the neshama can live without a guf. There are neshamas now in Gan Eden that have no gufim. So they can obviously exist without each other. But what happens is when they're merged, both of these merge into a super consciousness called the Adam, man, which we all are. And what happens is, in that merger, both of these become drives, you see, impinging on this combined consciousness. That seems to be what it is at this point, without going into more specific detail, which is really not necessary.
So in Olam Haba, when the wheel is lifted and the choice is clear which direction to go, what is the Adam then, the superconscious?
That's what we're going to see. In Olam Haba, are there bodies in Olam Haba? I mean,
are we still around like we are now, but maybe we're to see some...
Are there bodies in Olam Haba?
Yeah.
Who says there are bodies in Olam Haba? What? Well, yes, there are bodies in Olam Haba. The truth of the matter is, this combination remains forever. It is never altered. What is altered is something else, but not the synthesis or the combination. That remains the same. Now, let's discuss this in terms of what we are now. When we got a towel or something? No, maybe like over there, paper. They exist through each other now. It's much more complicated now. It's a real merge existence.
Reincarnation where there were multiple groups.
Yes.
And one neshama, I guess it's just the synthesis of all those things. So that's what sort of confused. If there were a few bodies connected to one soul, what happens?
Well, what happens is that the neshama actually begins to go down to different, it just combines with different groups of bodies. Disattaches, reattaches. But that's only because of the concept of death. Or if death didn't exist in the world, such a thing is not possible. But let's leave Berulah and so on. So, what we're talking about is the following. The notion of neshama, right, plus the notion of guf. Right? Now there's a combination. Now, the interesting question is the following. Okay, there's a combination. That sounds good. But, do both have the same inclinations? No, they still retain their separate identities, essentially. But, since they combined, their individual identities are now reduced by the other. The neshama is affected by the guf, meaning that its drive, okay, let's call that N1, okay? G1. What is G1? G1 represents the drive of the guf by itself, okay? If the guf existed on its own, its inclinations or its propensities, its drives, is called G1. The neshama's drives, when it exists by itself, is called N1. Okay? Let's be precise. When these two are combined, what happens to N and G? What do I mean? What happens to N and G? What happens is, when N1, right, is combined, right, to D1, what happens is the following. You never again have an absolute N alone, and you never again have an absolute G alone. You see, every N has a piece of G, and every G has a piece of N. Do you see what I'm saying? So, what you have is a new construction. This represents the Neshama Guf separately. Okay? This represents them together. So, the drive now that you have is the following. It's N1, G1. And this drive is G1, N1. Do we see that? This begins to resemble class of mathematics. I'm sorry. But, do we understand this? Now, here comes the thing. What happens when these are combined and this is the drive each? But which one is the stronger drive? You see, which is the stronger drive? Obviously, they are both equal. They are both equal. But what's very, very critical is something else. And this is what's it's called, and what I call a very important concept, the GN ratio. What's that? Hey, we don't fool around here. I know what you do somewhere else, but we don't fool around here. This is one of the most important concepts that you will ever hear in Hashkafa, and I really mean it. If you can grasp this concept, really what it is, you will really understand that. What is the GN ratio? Now watch. I spoke a little about it in Hanukkah, when I gave that shir in Hanukkah. Okay? What do I mean? Let's take Adam Rishon, the first man. He had a neshama and he had a guf. He had a drive of a neshama and he had a drive of a guf. What was his drive of the neshama? The drive of the neshama was to understand truth and to cling to absolute truth. To understand the inner reality of things, the inner spirituality of all things. That's the drive of the neshama. What's the drive of the guf? To enjoy itself in what? In physical reality. But is that what Adam experienced? No. That's what you experience. Halabai. But at your best, that's what you experience. There's a side of you that wants to appreciate the higher, and there's a side of you that wants to appreciate the lower. You see. And you're always battling between the two positions. Was this what Adam was troubled with? No. Adam didn't have this problem at all. Because what happened was, his N was much greater than his G. Much more profound. Meaning that, what do you mean he's greater than the G? What it means, it doesn't mean that the power of the neshama was greater than the power of his guf. What it really means is that the expression of his neshama was greater than the expression of his guf, in the sense that his guf was much higher. What do I mean? There is a continuum, an N continuum and a G continuum. Okay? What is an N continuum? An N continuum means that the drive of the neshama, N, can be experienced in a series of different magnitudes. You see? And the same thing with the guf. In other words, even though there's a G drive and there's an N drive, but it's capable of being experienced along different levels of magnitude. You have a neshama. How strong is the pull of your neshama? Well, you can have a weak little neshama, and all it does is hiccup. Or you can have a very powerful neshama, and it drives you wild. Spiritually wild. You see. The same thing with the guf. You can have a guf which is extremely base. Or you can have a guf drives, which are very elevated. You see. So in other words, with an N or with an G, there's a very wide continuum. Do we see? So N and G both have large magnitudes to them. Now, wait. When N and G are now combined, you see, when there's this kind of thing, the question is, what happens here? It starts out like the following, and this is what I mean by the GN ratio. It is the ratio of these two continuums. Meaning that when Adam Rishon first started, the first man, his N was over here, right? Was very high, and his G was very high. Both were at the top of the scale. What does that mean? That means that his neshama is extraordinarily powerful, meaning that he can feel the experience or drive of the neshama almost almost, but not quite, as if he didn't even have a guf. You hear that? That's what Adam Rishon was. His neshama was still so great because he was the first man, never done a sin in his life. He was the first creation of the Bnei Shalom. When he woke up, what was he? He was a neshama that experienced to the top level of that neshama. You see, in a guf environment. It wasn't an original N1, it wasn't an isolated N1. It was still an NG, because it was at a guf. But what it was is that he experienced his neshama in a very powerful proportion. It was only slightly less than the drive or the experience if there would have not been a guf at all. Well, what does that mean about the guf? That tells us that the guf was very weak. You see, when Adam saw the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, what do you think he wanted to do? When Rebbeinu said, don't eat from this Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, what do you think he did? You think he salivated because he went after the fruit? You think he was into the eating of the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra? Although that's what it sounds like, because the Rebbeinu says, don't eat it. What is eating? Eating seems to imply a drive to eat. Well, what's a drive to eat? Well, that's like sitting down to a real meal, a delicious dinner, right? You think that's what Adam wanted? No. What Adam wanted was to eat in Eitz Hadas, but the eating was not the same as our eating. His physical eating was very, very high, like his N was, meaning that when he ate, he was able to really experience a very high N. He knew that in that Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, the tree of good and evil, if he would eat it, it would give him enormous power of mind. It would be able to illuminate incredible concepts, almost concepts to the level of a god, that level of understanding. That's what he was after. But the concept of knowledge, or the drive for knowledge, is a drive of N, of the neshama. But in the guf, it manifests itself as eating, you see. So that when Adam wanted to eat from the Eitz Hadas Tov Ra, the tree, he saw it as an opportunity to achieve knowledge which was never before understood. Almost a divine knowledge. But it represented it in a drive for eating. But it wasn't an eating feeling, you see. It was an enraptured, ecstatic feeling of almost total understanding. That was his drive to eat. Now, we say also, what kind of man was this? What kind of man had this drive to eat, where the eating itself was almost spiritual? The answer? The G-N ratio. The N was much greater than the G. If the N was 10, then the G is 1. You see. Which means that even though the two are merged, but the power of the N is very high and the power of the G is very low, so that the sum total of both experiences is almost a N, but through the vehicle of a G. Do we understand what I'm talking about? Am I clear?
Even though his G was way up there.
Yeah, no, his G was very up means it was very low. I'm sorry. If this is 1 and that's 10, I'm sorry. This is 1 and this is 10. The N was over here, was 9, and the G was 1. You see what I'm talking about? His N was 9, means it was almost at the top, and his G was 1. It barely sneezed. He can barely feel it. His body was to him almost like your shirt is to you. You get that feel of that? Now that sounds weird. Literally, that's how he experienced. What do I mean he experienced the body? I mean, he was in his body, but the pressure of the body, the drive of the G was a 1. So he felt it like you feel your shirt. You feel your shirt, or you feel your jacket on you? Yes, you feel it, right? But you feel it strongly? No. Most of the day you're oblivious to the feeling. But when you give it mind, suddenly you feel a little the weight there, you know what I mean? That's what he felt about his body. What was the GN? 1 to 9. What happened? Now you remember what this GN means. This GN symbolizes an aspect of experience. This is not just numbers on a board. This is the relationship of his guf and neshama. This is the way he felt about himself. You see, do you feel this type of GN? You don't even know what that is.
We do not no longer have even in mind what Adam Rishon was. What happened? Adam did a sin. He did a chet. He did a sin. What is the din? What is the justice? What does the mitzvah din demand when you do a sin? Since he was given one mitzvah, and that one mitzvah was supposed to do what? Not one mitzvah. He could have created Olam Haba. He failed to do it. So suddenly the Satan runs up to the higher court and says, wait a minute, this man failed. Annihilate him. Why? Because he failed the job. You can't give him something for nothing. That's the old story of Naaman and Ksufa. That's what justice demands. Suddenly, what runs in? The Anhogas HaYichud. Remember, it's a backup system. It runs in and says, no, let's not do that. Let's not annihilate him. Let's do something else. Let's find another road, you see. What is the key mechanism of Anhogas HaYichud? How does it find another road? Let's make the road darker, more difficult. Why does it make it more difficult? The logic would be, well, if he couldn't make it when the road was lighter, how is he going to make it when the road was more difficult? What kind of logic is that? We'll go into the logic some other time. Okay? I go one step at a time. Let's first understand the mechanism. Okay? Let's make the road darker. Okay. How do you make the road darker? What do you affect? The GN ratio. That is how the road becomes darker. What happens? Suddenly Adam Rishon wakes up the next morning, and what happens? His N, okay, this is Adam Rishon with a 1 to 9, okay, GN. After the Chet, right, Adam 2, right, what's his ratio? 2 to 8. Do you know what it means to be a 2 to 8 when you were first a 1 to 9? What? Now he's got a... That's right. It's no longer a shirt. It was a t-shirt. Very good. A man's with me. I like that. It is now, he's got a sweater on. You see.
It's starting to get warm in the garden.
What does that mean? It means, how do we see that? How do we see that the GN changed from 2 to 8? You see. How do we see that? You know where you see that? You don't even realize when you look at the Chumash. You remember the Bonishim said after the Chet, the Bonishim cursed Chava, Adam, and the Nachash, and the Bonishim said to Adam, from now, you will have to till the ground to derive your pleasure. What does that mean? That means that now you're going to have to be involved in real eating processes. You see, no longer will your eating simply be an intellectual eating. You're going to have to become a farmer. You're going to have to work in the ground. You see what I'm saying? In other words, now suddenly the G became stronger. Now eating became more eating. You see? Does that mean that the eating was less spiritual? Not really. You see? For other reasons. It simply means that the pleasure of the thing was more hidden. But essentially, his guf is now more powerful and his neshama is now weaker. You should know, this is a staggering thing. You've got to put yourself in the position of Adam Rishon before and after the Chet. You don't realize, it's like waking up in the morning and looking in the mirror with another face. What kind of experience would that be for you all? That would be horrifying. Or let's say suddenly you went to sleep and you had a nice, handsome, young face. You woke up and you were 30 years older. How would you feel? You would be devastated. That's exactly what happened to Adam. Except that it wasn't in wrinkles, it was in the pressure of his body. See, he was literally a different person, and he knew it. No longer was he the great Adam Rishon before the Chet, equivalent almost to the Malachim, you see, of an exalted form. Now he was a real, live man. See. But, was he like us? No. Because he was a 2 to 8. What was he? He was capable of great prophecy. He was still able to communicate with spirituality. You see. He was capable of what? Of reading, or his neshama was still able to contact, or relate to, or interact with very high spiritual forces. He was still able to do that. but not as great anymore. You see. What happened after Adam? His sons and their children began to do more and more sins. You see. What happened? What was again the immediate thing? As soon as the Baruch Shem said, let's destroy the world, as soon as the Mishpah said, let's destroy the world, who jumped up? Said, no, let's find another way. Another way. It's always attempting to save it. And what is its other way? What is its always key mechanism? Tibbur Sarah. And what is the favorite tool of Tibbur Sarah? The GN ratio. So slowly, man began to be reduced in stature. You see, we can literally go through history, and I can show you at different points in time exactly what that means. And we'll do that. We'll do it for one point. When suddenly the Boris Ra was so great, it literally shifted the GN. Now, up to a certain point of time, the GN, right? Which is bigger and which is smaller? The N is always bigger than the G, right? We would be curious to know in history when suddenly, what? It shifted. Right. Who has what idea when the G became greater than the N? When the G was now 6 and the N was 4, let's say. Who's got an idea? Who? That's right. Hey, we got a really good point. Right, so the first destruction of the first temple. When the first base of Mikdash was destroyed, the GN was shifted to the other side. Hence, people never again experienced prophecy. Never again did they experience prophecy. Never again did they experience the drive to worship idols. What was the drive to worship idols? You think these people were crazy? You think they just stuck up stones and they bow down to stones? These people were as bright as you are. Make no mistake about it. What happened? The desire to worship an idol wasn't a desire to worship a stone. Because at that time, the neshamas was still, the N was still greater than the G. Which means that they can really feel a pleasure of the soul. They had pleasures of the soul. That's a crazy feeling to us. What does it mean, a pleasure of the soul? What does that mean? You see, they can access their neshama, their soul directly, and literally experience a pleasure which was directly related to the neshama. That's why I call the period when N is greater than G, I call the period of direct access. You see, meaning that they can experience their neshamas, the pleasure in the neshamas directly. They can literally get high. The neshama can get high while it's in the body, and they can feel it. Of course, it has to be mediated through the body, but they can feel it. When G became greater than N, we went to what's called indirect access. Because no longer can you ever feel the neshama directly. The guf was the more powerful of the two. That's what happened. So since prophecy left the world, Avodah Zorah left the world. The desire to worship idols, which was a desire to contact with high spirituality, except through the wrong side, that left the world. So mankind never experienced it anymore. We laugh at them. We say the ancient Egyptians, they were nuts. What does that mean? Worship the Nile, worship this, and so on and so forth. Worship the sun. What were they, crazy? We don't understand. They literally were able to derive spiritual forces from these things and connect to these things. We don't know how they did it. We could never do it again. You see. Like I say, when Moses, and I spoke on Hanukkah, when Moshe Rabbeinu came and he did a miracle, he turned the Nile into blood. Right? That's an extraordinary thing. What was the immediate reaction of the Egyptians? Ooh, this guy is incredible. No big deal. What does that mean, no big deal? That's GN ratio. That's what a GN ratio where N is bigger than a G, direct access, means NBG. NBD, no big deal. When G is greater than N, it's BD, big deal. You see. But that's really what it was. At the fourth one, they already saw that it was a big deal already. You see, why? Because this was nothing to them. The ability to manipulate the spiritual forces and therefore manipulate physical reality was a simple matter for them. We don't have that anymore. We've lost that. But they had that. That's why they weren't concerned with biology, chemistry, or physics. Why do you want to be concerned with the physiology of blood when you can turn water into it? You see, this is the thing. If you understand this, the Jewish concept of the evolution of man is inverse to the Goyish concept, or the secular concept. We believe that man has gone down in Madrega. They believe that man has gone up. It's the exact opposite. And they call those people primitive, right? Aborigines, you know what I mean? Ancient man. You know what I mean? We call ourselves modern man, you see. No, that's Drechtigetuk, as they say in Yiddish. You see, that's not true. We are ancient man. We are primitive. Because we are all G. You see. That's what the story is. But you must remember, the shift of a GN comes from it is the critical manifestation of Tiburis Torah, which is the essential mechanism of the Hanadat HaYichud designed to counteract the annihilative directives of the Hanadat HaMishpat. Do we understand that? What's very critical to understand is that the GN ratio is not just a number on the board. It is literally a human experience. It is what it means to be human. To be human 2,500 years ago has nothing to do to be human today. Absolutely nothing. They were literally different human beings. You see. If you fail to understand that, if you find it hard to accept, as I said to you before, look at yourself. When you were 4 years old, who was the real you? What you are now when you were 4? What? You would say you're both yourself. But make up your mind. The answer is, you see that you could be the same person, right, and yet shift in totality into your consciousness. You can literally be the same ego with two different sets of ideas. A 4-year-old, when you were 3 years old, you were concerned about toilet training. You were preoccupied with resisting toilet training. This newfangled invention of mommy, you see. That's what you were preoccupied with. Hopefully at this age you've gotten by that. You see. Were you the same person? Yes and no. So if you yourself can shift developmentally, you see, and be different people at this point in time, you see, don't you think that this is possible chronologically? Which of course it is. And that's exactly what happened. That's why the Gemara says, you know what the Gemara says? The Gemara says an interesting statement. The Gemara says, the Gemara is talking about this. Who is the Gemara? The Gemara was written at about 300 AC. 400 AC. So they were way after direct access. The people who wrote the Gemara, and I don't know if you know the people who wrote the Gemara, the people who wrote the Gemara were people who every one of them were able to revive the dead. You couldn't get your name into the Mishnah if you didn't have the ability to revive the dead. Right? I want you to know, that was the club. It was called the Revival Club. For the ones born again Jews. Right? That's what it is, because, and you see it in the Gemara itself, because one of the Roman emperors said to one of Rabbi Nasi, he said to him, even the smallest among you can revive the dead. Even though it also means that if he's misfollowed, he's Mechayim Esim. The smallest among them, you see. And they were in the period of what? Direct access or indirect access? Indirect access. And you know what they said? They once said the following. They said, I forget which one it was that said, if the earlier people if we are considered like, if the earlier people were, they said if we are people, if we are considered people, they are considered angels, meaning the people who lived at the time of the first temple. If they were considered people, then we are considered like donkeys, and not even like the donkey of Batrich Ben Yoya. I think I told you the story of the donkey of Ben Yoya. Remember that story? There were a couple of robbers that stole the donkey of a Tana. He was in the revivalist club, and Batrich Ben Yoya, an incredible person, and they stole the donkey, and the donkey refused to eat. So the thieves realized that the donkey's going to die in them, so they restored it to a Princess Benyor. And they said to him, here's your donkey, we don't want it to die, and we're not going to gain anything from this. But they said, we don't understand, why did he have ate? So they said, well, wait a minute. when you gave him the food, did you take out a certain proportion of the food and give it to the Kohanim and the Levium? So I said, of course not. He said, that's why my donkey refused to eat. So I said, how does your donkey know? How does your donkey know whether or not you took it out? You see, what am I talking about? Because it sounds strange. Because there's a mitzvah in the Torah that if you have certain produce, you have to separate 1/60 and 1/10 to go to the Kohanim and the Levium. Now, that's the mitzvah. Once you separate it, then you're allowed to eat it. You see, so you know. How do you know when you can eat it? Well, you know if it's separated or not. But a very big tzaddik, someone who's really in touch with the neshama, can look at that food and he can feel whether or not you've taken it out. Because whether or not you've taken it out, literally, is a spiritual essence in the thing itself. It's called tevel or gemaisid. Tevel, which is food which there was no tithe at all, literally has certain spiritual impurities about it, which you cannot feel. A very great tzaddik can't feel such a thing, you see. In those days they could feel it. But here you have the extraordinary thing that the donkey of a Pesach was able to feel it. That's why the Gemara says, if we're like people, they're like angels. But if they're like people, then we're like donkeys. It means our ability to sense spirituality, because the heavy G and the NG ratio is such that we cannot sense that level of spirituality, you see. And we're not even as good as the donkey of Pinchas ben Yair, who was capable of sensing that spirituality. You see what I'm saying? That's what they were saying. That's an incredible thing. They're not talking about people who were just smarter than they were. They are talking about supermen, you see. What do you mean supermen? They're not supermen by virtue of anything they've done. They were supermen, the people who lived then. Why? Because they were born at that time. It's no big deal. They were born at that time. And all the shamas at that time, he had that level of spiritual sensitivity. There were over 1 million prophets in those days, in the time of the first temple. Over 1 million people. That's staggering. A prophet is much greater than a person who can revive the dead. I want you to know that. To revive the dead is a small trick to a Navi. You know, a Navi is much bigger than Chiyas HaMeitim. There's a certain level, you see. But it's lower than Nevi'ah in Kedusha. You see. And those people, that's what they were. That's what they were. Hence, the critical thing you must understand is that the GN refers to the drop in human consciousness. You literally feel like a different person, you see. Let's go now. What is the GN today? Where are we holding? Well, we're a long way, even from where? We're a long way even from the level of indirect access, you see. If G became greater than N, 2,000 years ago, Rahman the sun where we're holding, you see. The truth of the matter is, we're holding on a GN, right? We're, in my estimation, we're holding on a GN, in my estimation, where the N is something like 0.2, and the G is 9.8. How do I know what I'm talking about? You must understand what G means. G. There's another concept to G. When G gets very high, it not only means that your body now feels like a sack of potatoes, you see, or walking around with a backpack with weights in it, you see. It means much more than that. It means not only you have the ability to experience something different, but it means what's available to you has changed. Walk along Madison Avenue, Fifth Avenue, or any of these things. You can go into stores, and you can buy anything that you want. Every luxury for your body is there. From the simplest to the most elegant clothes, the simplest to the most elegant furniture, the simplest to the most elegant homes, right? But homes, houses, clothes, furniture, food, all of these are these objects which the neshama wants or which the guf wants. They are objects which the guf wants, which means that as G becomes bigger, the ability to watch, to sustain those drives becomes bigger, which means the world becomes more and more materialistic, and it becomes more and more knowledgeable of how to supply that materialism. You must understand what that means. That means that the chokhmah which is given to the world is shifted technology, so that mankind has the ability to supply these material niceties. That's all part of the GN. You see, that's what it is. The GN doesn't mean that now you're running after your body and you don't even know that the neshama exists anymore. Barely. You see, the GN means that you've got all kinds of stores, and you can almost buy whatever you want. You see, given the money to satisfy your body in all its little intricacies. You see what I'm saying? That's what a GN means. If 500-600 years ago, 1,000 years ago, they didn't have this available, or 2,000 years ago, they didn't have a Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue, it's because they didn't need the Fifth Avenue or Madison Avenue. It was a whole different story. You see, this end was still under capacity, where that world supplied whatever they needed at the M level that they were, and the G level. You see, this is really what it was. The world, therefore, itself, the scientific technology itself changes with the GN. Everything shifts, not just the human experience, but the totality of the existence of the world itself changes. You see, it's not only man who changes, but it's his culture. Man's culture reflects the GN, just as much as as a state of awareness. Do you see now why it's so subtle? Because how can you experience it? When you are born and you grow up, you are already produced, you are already created within a given culture and with a given set of drives. You don't know that it's possible that there were once people who had a totally different type of experience. How are you going to know that from? From where? Where are you going to draw your comparison from? To you, this is all you've got, and to you, this is all you are. And to you, which is worst of all, this is all humanity is. You see? Because where are you going to draw your comparison from? Where are you going to learn this from? Do you see the point? That's what it is. That's why Tikkun Torah is the most subtle thing that has ever been done to the mind of man. It is the most deceptive, subtle quality. That's why when I said to you, the ascendancy of evil, so you said to me, whoa, ascendancy of evil, you don't look out. I can see it coming from a mile away. Anyone can smell evil. No, you can't. Because what it is the evil that you experience is the diminution of your very mind, your very consciousness. Your entire ego is constricted or narrowed into a different perception. How are you going to spot that when you don't know what you could have been before? You see. You're going to spot that in your culture? Not necessarily, because your culture is an exact reflection of your GN. It's only people who are born with higher levels of N, and there are, within any generation. There are some people who, even though there's a GN restricted to each generation, but that itself is a continuum. There are certain people who are born who are very, very powerful in N, within that GN. Even though, you see, the GN is 9.8 to 2, it's 0.2. But there are some people who are what? Who are 9 to 1. Still, they're hangers on, you know what I mean? There's these holdouts, these diehards, you see, that won't give up. These are the guys who suffer, because these are the guys who sit and they mourn. Why? They don't mourn because they feel the drop. Why? Because they can look at the culture, they can look at the reality, and they look at all the people, and they see the donkeys. You understand? They know what it means to be a person yet, and what it means to be a donkey. The donkey has no idea that he's a donkey. You see what I'm saying? They suffer. You see. Now, the ultimate question, can you raise your GN? Given a certain GN which is determined by your generation, can you raise it? Yes, you can. That's what it means to be a tzaddik. A tzaddik, by definition, is an individual who raises the GN. How much? What? That depends. Is there a maximum? Yes. He cannot go beyond the maximum, beyond the given in that generation. He cannot. That's why the Gemara says that Hillel was so great in his time with the Gemara and the Mishnah, that if he had been in the time of Moshe Rabbeinu, he would have received the Torah. You see. Well, what does that mean? But he couldn't receive the Torah because he wasn't in that time, he wasn't even a prophet. What prevented Hillel from being a prophet? The GN of that generation. It was cut off. You understand these statements? Now they all fit and they all make sense. You see. What I'm trying to give you is the inner soul of all these Gemaras and what they're really talking about. They understood what that was. We no longer understand. This information has been essentially lost. You see, it's an astounding thing. If I would sit here and I would teach this to a whole base medrash, they would have an inkling of what this is, but it would also be very vague to them. Because that's the incredible deception of the Tikvah Salah. It's very hard to transcend it. And to really understand what this is about. That's what Choshech is. That's why when I said at the beginning of tonight, I will tell you for the first time what real darkness is. This is what real darkness is. It is a darkness that looks like light. Therein lies its subtlety. It's a darkness, it's an absolute darkness at midday. Go tell that there's a darkness. Go figure it out. Okay. Don't let anyone know about the mathematics here. Oh, one second, please. I want to make one announcement. Next week will be my last time here until I come back. And what it is I ask everyone, if possible, to